Hello, my name is Chris William. I'm the executive producer and moderator for Carolina Business Review. It's a weekly syndicated PBS series seen throughout North and South Carolina for the last 30 years or so. And we talk about business and policy and public affairs. And what we're trying to do with these online, both Facebook Live as well as YouTube TV, 15 to 20 minute interludes and interviews are to take some of those folks that we've had on our program that can give us some very unique and strategic insights and bring those to you real time, here and now. And one of those people, one of our first panelists 30 years ago, we welcome from his home office, as everyone is doing right now. He is a professor of finance and financial economics, the Barings Professor of Financial Economics in the Bell College of Business at UNC Charlotte. We welcome Dr. John Connaughton. John, it's nice to see you. Welcome. And assuming you're staying safe.
We're staying safe. We've been locked up now for 4 weeks, and we're getting real familiar with the Instacart app and ordering food.
Well, you're good about supporting.
We've been following the guidelines.
Yeah, John, let's start off. You know, one of the biggest numbers today were the unemployment claims, more than 6.6 million on top of last week's 5 million plus. What are those kind of Herculean outsized numbers? First of all, what does it say? And then what's the near-term effect?
Okay, so in the last 3 weeks, we've had 3.36 and then a little 6 again. So, you know, we're looking at about, all told, probably 16 or 17 million jobless claims. We've never seen anything like this before. Let's be clear about this. In the past, what you typically see is probably 1 million or so per month when you're on the downslide, and it takes 6, 7, 8, 9 months for the unemployment, which is typically a trailing indicator. People need to understand that. In most recessionary environments, unemployment is a trailing indicator. So we see these unemployment claims rolling in really after the fact on a very slow monthly basis. It takes 8 or 9 months for them to complete the cycle, if you will. But now, because we've voluntarily shut down the economy and basically sent pink slips to millions of people, we're seeing this happen in a very short period of time. I ran the numbers today. In a gross sense, the increase in these unemployment claims the last 3 weeks would produce about a 14% rate of unemployment if we were to do an unemployment survey right now. So we would have gone from 3.5% to 14% basically overnight in the course of 3 weeks. Now, I do not believe that it is as bad as it is indicated because while we are laying people off in droves, we are also seeing a lot of newer industries, the at-home delivery industries, Walmart, Amazon, etc., the food stores, all starting to try to add workers. I'll get back to that in a minute. Right. So my guess is that it's being offset a little bit, but I would say not offset a lot. So instead of 14%, I'd say we're probably looking at about 12% rate of unemployment, which no one in our lifetime has seen that kind of level of unemployment.
Okay, wait a minute. Hold on. Before you unpack that statistically, let me go to just the shock and awe as you have talked about that number. Does the psychological and emotional part of that completely undermine undermine people's confidence? And second part of that, where you were going, does that number does it really, not really, but does it represent where you think the economy will be in 3, 6, 9, 12 months?
Okay, the first one is complicated, but I think it's a good question. I think we need to unpack that. Number one, as I said, this is unprecedented. We've voluntarily shut the economy down. Now, we haven't shut the whole economy down, obviously. Probably 80+% of it is still operating because it does not need, it's either deemed as a necessity and therefore it continues to operate, or it can operate online and adhere to the social distancing requirements. But 20% of the economy has clearly been shut down. The real issue here and this is the issue that nobody really wants to discuss, and that is, what happens on the other side of this? And it all depends on how quickly the economy starts up. Let me explain to you the psychology involved here. If this turns out to be a month, 6 week shutdown, and then the economy starts to slowly, and we need to understand, we're not going to go flip a switch and everything back to normal, but we're going to start to see this in 6 weeks. If we start to see the economy slowly be brought back to life, then I don't think that we're going to have the same dire consumer confidence issues that we have during a normal recession, where it takes 6 or so months to get into it. People are constantly being harangued. They don't know why it happened. Lots of folks have lost their jobs, and there's no prospect for those jobs to come back anytime soon, if ever. If ever. So that's really what we're dealing with here. I think that we get this thing started back within 4 to 6 weeks, even on a reduced basis. People will have the hope of, okay, all right, this is a short-lived thing. I'm likely to get my job back. If not in this month, probably next month or the month after that. There are enough support systems out there right now to tide me over. I'm not going to go into panic mode, and I'm not going to just hunker down and like we saw in 2008, 2009. That's the critical thing. The problem, Chris, is, I think everyone understands, is what's the likelihood that we're going to start this thing up at the end of April or the first week or two of May?
Oh, okay, well, go ahead, finish the thought. I'm sorry, John.
No, that's what I'm really concerned about.
Okay, so when you've got social scientists trying to talk to economic or fiscal scientists, and then you've got healthcare professionals and public health all projecting something different because they don't talk each other's languages, how do we get to, quote unquote, what opening up the economy looks like, and who has the right projection?
All right. Okay. So far, for the last, I would say, month at least, the virologists, the medical side of things, have been driving the bus exclusively. And it has been in their judgment that the appropriate behavior here is to essentially shut down the economy, social distancing, to try to defeat this virus. So that's been the number one thing that's been going on right now. All along, their modeling has been overly pessimistic. I think we can all agree with that. Early on, they were talking 150 to over 1 million deaths in the United States. And continually, as the social distancing seems to work, they've been continuing ratcheting that down to now we're at 40,000 in the latest modeling that they generate. Those models, no matter who runs them, are based on sets of assumptions. One of the things I've been doing is I have been tracking cases on a moving average basis, new cases on a moving average basis. I think that there's lumpiness in the data, and it's hard to write an equation when you've got jagged data. But if you smooth that data out, you can begin to write an equation, a mathematical equation for it. What I've seen is for the last, let me just check my numbers here. I'm just going to be sure about this. Sure. But for the last, I would say, 11 to 12 days, we've seen a flattening of the curve nationally in the U.S. And I think that's very important to understand. And we are now down, at points in time, we were adding 40% new cases. When it tended to stabilize, it was about 25% new cases every day. Excuse me. You remember about 8 or 10 days ago, we had the news media go bonkers when in 5 days we doubled the number of cases.
Right, sure.
But it wasn't that 5 days we doubled the number of cases. What they were looking at was it went from 100,000 5 days ago to 200,000. That's what caught their attention. And then, it doubled in 5 days. Well, earlier on, a week before that, it was doubling every 3 days. But the magnitude of cases wasn't as much. What's happening is so many people just focus on the raw numbers and not on the trends and the underlying trends involved. Okay? So right now, we're running at about an 8% new case rate per day. Now we're down to doubling every 10 days. But if you look at it for the last, I said, 11 days, that number has been coming down. So if you think about this, and I'm going to have to use a little diagram here with my hands. You know, at the very beginning and for the first month or so, the cases have been increasing at an increasing rate. Okay.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing them start to increase, but at a decreasing rate. They're never going to go to zero. They're just going to
plateau. That's the flattening of the curve, is what you're describing.
Yeah, it's a flattening of the curve, and not enough modeling and not enough folks are looking at that very seriously, in my estimation. If we didn't have new hotspots pop up, the way this data on our trending is, we would have almost a perfectly flat curve, i.e. no new cases, in probably 10 days to 2 weeks. However, that's not likely to happen because we have this rolling hotspot taking place. So now that New York is now increasing cases at a rate below the U.S. average. That's because they got a handle on it. They went through the process. They've isolated. They've been much more strict in terms of their enforcement of the social distancing requirements. But what's offsetting that is we're starting to see Georgia, Michigan, Louisiana, and a number of other places pop up as new hotspots. And so we're not going to get this in the next 2 weeks to zero new cases, but we're going to get close to that. And then we have to ask ourselves a really very, very simple question. How do we start the economy back up? We can't turn a switch and say, okay, everybody go back to work. What we've got to do is look at this thing from a geographic standpoint and from an industry-specific standpoint and figure out exactly how we want to start the economy back up slowly.
So I'm sorry, John, there's just so much information to get in, and I know you've got a lot in your head about this. So you're talking about restarting regionally to figure out where the best places are.
Let's take a look at Germany. Germany has a plan, okay? So we don't even have a commission yet. The president's talking about starting a commission. That should have been in place 2 weeks ago, yeah. Okay? But they were so overwhelmed with hysteria, that's the best I can say. I mean, we went through the ventilator issue where we had, and now we're producing ventilators that apparently it looks like we're going to have this surplus of ventilators that are going to be basically worthless because they're falling out of the protocol of treatment because
like the surplus of toilet paper and the surplus of wipes and all the supply lines will catch up.
But I mean, the ventilator issue was the hot topic for about 2 weeks. Ventilators. Well, as it turns out, ventilators are a bad protocol in treating this disease. They wind up killing you. The cure in this case is worse than the disease. But back to where we're headed on this. If we look at what Germany is doing, they've had a commission in place for a while. They already now have a plan about starting the economy back up. They're doing two things. One is they're looking at it from an industry-specific standpoint. They're saying, we believe it'll be safe to start up certain industries, and what they're focusing on are what they call high-value industries, industries that add a lot to GDP. So they're going to start their auto industry back up. That's one of the first ones. They're going to start their tech industries back up. They're going to start their finance industries back up, etc. What they're not going to start back up is their hospitality, leisure, arts, entertainment industries, which require large crowds. And
okay, so let me take you in a couple different places, and then we only got time for a couple more questions. So the idea, when you repatriate the German model back to the U.S., or in our case, the Southern region, the Carolinas, does this mean that hospitality and those type of service industries that you talked about as being non-essential will not be prioritized? And what is the impact of, let's just say, the restaurants? If the restaurants do see a 40 to 50% non-reoccurring opening, how much does that handicap the reopening of the economy and confidence in general in numbers, blah, blah, blah?
Okay, hospitality industry, leisure, art, entertainment is separate from restaurants. Restaurants will start to be able to open up. They're already open on a takeout basis. Okay, all the restaurants have modeled. My favorite restaurants are sending me things about what we can go pick up and take home. They have meals for the week, and you can click on and pre-order meals for any particular day of the week that you want, and half price bottles of wine on top of that. So they're adapting to this, and so the restaurant industry is separate, and that will slowly begin to open up. But let me give you an example of what we're talking about here. We need to do two things. We need to look at the high-value industries that we believe it'll be safe to open up with testing. Those will be antibody tests to see, make sure people don't have the disease and enter the facility. So we'll be opening up industries for people to go to work to. We'll do that regionally. So what I mean by that is there are still hotspots. There are hotspots by states in the U.S. Maybe those aren't the ones that open up. There are hotspots by county in North Carolina. Maybe those are ones that we don't want to open up initially. So this is going to have to be planned regionally in terms of where we can do this. And then we'll open up those industries that we can. Industries that create clusters of people, large meeting places, etc. Those are the ones that are going to have to be delayed in terms of opening maybe until sometime in the summer. But if we can get 60, 70% of the economy back up and running in a month, that's going to change the calculus of how people believe this is going to play out. And it's the psychology, I think, that ultimately long-term is important.
Oh, okay, so one of the bright spots in the Carolinas, you pick any urban core, Charleston, Columbia, Raleigh, Asheville, Greenville, et cetera, has been commercial and residential real estate and development, commercial specifically offices, residential, multifamily. What happens to those? And then if it does slow down in a meaningful way, do loan defaults become an issue for real estate?
Well, loan defaults are always an issue. I mean, that's clearly a case that, anecdotally, we already know that lots of people are taking advantage of this and not paying their mortgages or their rents because there have been, holidays basically allowed for this. And so I think that's always a risk here. The question is, again, if we can get this thing going again reasonably soon, those aren't going to be long-term problems, okay? But, real estate is going to be an issue. One of the things that I think that's been not talked about in all of this is the fact that, one of the things that leads to regular recessions is volatility in investment. And you can bet your bottom dollar that every company that had an investment scheme planned has shut that down. They pulled the plug, and I don't think anybody is going to start a new investment expenditure.
3 months?
Foreseeable future. Yeah, for the foreseeable future, 3 to 6 months for sure.
Okay.
The big thing, Chris, is this, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't bring this up. If we start the economy too late, it'll go into a great recession, probably worse than what we saw 2008, 2009. On the other side of things, if we start it back too quickly and we get a bounce in terms of a respike, if you will, in infection rates, then this thing is going to go on for a long period of time. It could be even worse than if we don't start the economy up. These are the unknowns, and no one knows what that right answer is. But we have to have a balance between the economy and public safety. I'll give you a couple of examples of how we're not handling things real well right now. We want people to stay at home, but then we funnel them into supermarkets, that are just constant close contact. I don't care what you say, that doesn't work. I'll give you another one. The state of North Carolina. Governor says, stay home, don't drive, don't do this. But at the same time, 10% of the state's cars need to be re-registered this month, which require an inspection. They haven't waived the inspection. So now you got to go out to the inspection station to get your car inspected to re-register the car, which you can't drive, or pay a penalty. Meantime, if you don't re-register the car, the city and county don't get the property tax on it.
So John, last question. When we look back on 2020, what will the economy look like? When you look at 2020, what will you say, okay, it finally restarted in Q3, Q4, or we're still waiting for it? What do you think the numbers are going to look like?
I would say we will be lucky to have a single-digit unemployment rate in December. Put it to you as bluntly as that. Yeah. So December is going to look like the peak of 2009, fall of 2009, early 2010, when the unemployment rate in the country was pushing 10%. So that's what we're going to be looking at. And it's going to require some massive stimulus, and I don't know if we have the capacity to generate massive stimulus to jumpstart the economy. We've spent so much already on trying to make people whole in this. I mean, we have all kinds of strange things. On one hand, we've sent out money to small businesses to try to keep employees hired so we keep people on the payroll. And the other, we've doubled the unemployment compensation payments. And so we have the Employment Security Commission competing with small business for workers. In other words, if you're a small business person and you're paying your workers $15 an hour, that's $600 a week, well, they can either work for you 40 hours a week to get $600, or they can get $600 a week in unemployment compensation from the Employment Security Commission.
Yeah.
I mean, we said, so far our design of stimulus has not been really, really good. We haven't thought it all the way through, but we spent $2.5 trillion at least, or in the process of spending $2.5 trillion, money which we don't have. And then, you know, if we want to have a stimulus to get the economy going again in the fall, where's that money coming from?
Where's our dry powder? Yeah, I agree. John, thank you. I'm going to let you go and finally say thanks for being flexible enough to work through the technology to get this going, but also.
Chris, one final thing I want to say. I think most people now know why we call economics the dismal science.
Out of your mouth, not mine.
Yeah.
Just saying.
My mouth.
John, thank you. Happy Easter, happy Passover. I'm glad to see you again, of course, and stay safe.
All right. Thank you, Chris. And you be safe too. Stay at home.
Yes, sir. Thank you. See ya.
Bye-bye.